They didn't just break my bridge, they shattered 25 years of my life. I stood there, boots sinking in the muddy bank, watching as HOA contractors swung hammers into the same hand-carved stones my late wife and I had laid with our bare hands. Each strike echoed across the valley like a gunshot. And leading the charge, HOA President Linda Parker, clipboard in hand, sunglasses gleaming, yelling something about community standards. Funny thing is, I'm not even a member of their damn HOA. That stone bridge wasn't just a crossing, it was my memory, my boundary, and my peace. But that morning, as the last arch cracked and fell into the creek, I realized something. If they wanted to teach me a lesson, they had just enrolled themselves in a course they wouldn't survive. Before we dive into what happened next, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your location and local time in the comments. And if you love seeing HOA arrogance meet cold hard justice, make sure to subscribe, because this story only gets better from here. I've always believed that bridges tell stories, not the kind you read in books, but the kind that live in silence. Each stone, each curve, each mark of weathering carries a memory. And mine, it carried the memory of a lifetime. I built that stone bridge 25 years ago with my wife Eleanor. She was an artist, the kind who could see beauty in broken things. Back then, this land was nothing but a rough stretch of pasture along a quiet creek. We had no neighbors, no HOA, no rules, and no noise but the river's song. We mixed mortar ourselves, carried limestone blocks from the nearby quarry, and built the arch by hand. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Every morning, Eleanor would cross that bridge with her coffee, sit by the sycamore, and sketch the reflection of the stones on the water. That bridge wasn't just a structure, it was her favorite canvas. When she passed, I promised I'd never change a thing. I kept that promise for 20 years. 5 years ago, a developer bought the land across the creek, flat empty and ideal for a new gated community. I didn't think much of it at first. Progress comes, people move, and life continues. Then came the signs, Creekside Meadows, luxury living. Within a year, they paved everything, installed fences, and formed what they proudly called the Creekside HOA. I wasn't invited, and I didn't want to be. My property sat clearly outside their boundary line. The creek itself was the edge. My bridge connected to my own private gravel road that led to the county highway. No access to their side, no shared property, no obligation. But that didn't matter to Linda Parker. Linda was the new HOA president, early 50s, perfectly styled hair, always in pastel suits, like she was auditioning for a daytime courtroom show. She had a talent for control and a hunger for power. People said she'd moved from California after restructuring another HOA there, which, in plain English, meant she made everyone miserable until they sold their homes. The first time she visited, I was patching the lower edge of the bridge, replacing a cracked stone after a heavy storm. She arrived unannounced, holding a clipboard, and smiled that kind of smile that hides knives. "Mr. Harris, I presume," she said. "I'm the president of the Creekside Homeowners Association. We've received several concerns about this structure." "Structure?" I asked, looking up from my tools. "You mean my bridge? Well," she continued, "it's visible from the community walking trail, and a few residents have mentioned that it doesn't match the neighborhood's aesthetic. The stones look well rustic, maybe unsafe." I wiped my hands on my jeans and laughed softly. "Ma'am, this bridge has stood longer than your walking trail has existed, and it's on my land. So I'm afraid the HOA's aesthetic doesn't apply here." Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed just a fraction. "You'll find that community standards extend beyond mere borders, Mr. Harris. This area affects property values. Then maybe you should tell your property values to stay on your side of the creek," I said. That was our first meeting. After that, the letters started. At first, they were polite reminders. Friendly notice, bridge may be in violation of community safety codes. Then they escalated to second notice, remove unauthorized construction. Each one carried the same letterhead stamped with that smug gold HOA seal, like some mini government of tyranny. I ignored them. I'd built bridges that carried trucks heavier than their egos, and mine had county permits to prove it. But Linda didn't like to be ignored. Soon I noticed unfamiliar cars stopping by the edge of the road. Men in neon vests with measuring tools snapping photos, marking orange lines on the grass near my property markers. One of them even had a drone hovering above my bridge. I walked out, raised my hand, and yelled, "What do you think you're doing?" One of them turned, startled. "Survey work, sir. HOA expansion plans." "Expansion? You're on my land." He frowned, checked his clipboard, then pointed to a printed map. "According to this, the creek's public. The bridge falls under community easement." I took that paper and looked at it. It was an old developer's plat map from before the property was subdivided. outdated by decades. I could spot the error instantly. They had drawn the creek line about 30 feet too far north, right through my property. "You're trespassing," I said, handing it back. "And you can tell your boss this. If they touch one pebble of that bridge, they'll regret it." That evening, I drove to the county recorder's office and pulled every record tied to my land. I left with a folder, an inch-thick title deed, survey maps, tax boundaries, the original bridge permit signed in 1999. I even got an official certification from the county surveyor, confirming that my land and the bridge were entirely outside any HOA jurisdiction. A week later, I mailed Linda a copy stamped and notarized. I thought that would be the end of it. But people like Linda don't back down, they double down. At the next HOA meeting, which I wasn't supposed to hear about, but one of my kind neighbors told me Linda reportedly stood before her board and said, "That man across the creek thinks he's above the rules. We'll teach him what it means to be a good neighbor." I didn't know it then, but she meant it literally. Over the next month, they started calling the county to file anonymous safety reports. One claimed my bridge was structurally unstable. Another accused me of blocking community access to a public trail. All baseless, all thrown out, but each one took time and paperwork to dismiss. They even sent me a final compliance warning threatening daily fines of $500 if I didn't remove the bridge. I laughed so hard I nearly framed it. But deep down I started to feel uneasy. These weren't just bureaucrats, they were zealots in khakis. And zealots don't quit until they get a reaction. I remember standing on the bridge one quiet evening, sunset glowing orange on the stones. The water moved softly beneath, brushing against the moss-lined arches. For a moment I heard Eleanor's voice in my head, calm, wise, teasing. "Don't let them take it from you, Thomas," she used to say when I complained about city rules. "You built it with love, they can't regulate that." I smiled, whispering back to the air, "We'll see about that." The next morning, an envelope appeared in my mailbox, thick, official-looking. Inside was a notice of removal stamped HOA Enforcement Directive. It read, "In accordance with Section 4B of the Community Infrastructure Guidelines, all non-compliant crossings must be removed by HOA-appointed contractors for the safety and visual integrity of Creekside Meadows." I nearly tore the paper in half. I wasn't part of Creekside Meadows. My land had never been annexed, never agreed to their charter, never paid dues. This was pure overreach power play by a suburban monarch. So I did what any engineer would do. I documented everything. I photographed every letter, every map, every orange marking. I even installed a camera facing the bridge just in case. And as I reviewed those images later that night, something in my gut told me they were planning something big. The kind of thing you don't send in the mail. I didn't know it yet. But the lesson they were about to teach me would destroy more than just a bridge. It would destroy them. I used to think that paper was harmless. After a lifetime of engineering contracts, city permits, and technical drawings, I'd learned to respect documents, not fear them. But when an HOA wants to destroy you, paper becomes a weapon sharper than any blade. It started with what I called the paper war. Almost every week, a new envelope appeared in my mailbox. Each one thicker, louder, more ridiculous than the last. Notice of violation, notice of fine, final warning. They were all printed on glossy letterhead with the HOA crest, a golden oak leaf that looked like it belonged on a cheap wine bottle. One notice accused me of constructing an unapproved structure that obstructs community waterways. Another claimed my property disrupts the neighborhood's cohesive landscape aesthetics. One even said, "My use of river stones does not meet approved design palette." I almost choked on my coffee reading that one. I didn't even live in their damn neighborhood. Still, I decided to play it calm. I wrote back once very politely explaining that my land was privately owned outside the HOA's jurisdiction with county permits to prove it. I enclosed copies of every legal document thinking that would end the nonsense. It didn't. 2 weeks later, I woke up to the sound of spray cans hissing near the creek. I walked outside and froze. 4 men in orange safety vests were painting red lines along my fence posts, then walking toward my bridge. The sound of the paint shaking that metallic rattle still makes my jaw tighten. "Hey," I shouted. "What are you doing?" The nearest worker looked up. "Survey work, sir. Just marking the community boundary." The community boundary, I stepped closer. "This is my property line, and that's my bridge." He pulled a folded map from his vest pocket, smudged with dirt and creases. "According to HOA records, this section's been designated as community access terrain." I snatched the paper, my pulse hammering. The map was ancient, dated nearly 30 years ago, from when the land across the creek was still farmland. The creek's path had shifted slightly over the years, carving deeper into their side. But whoever had drawn this map hadn't updated it since the 1990 seconds, and conveniently their version showed the creek about 20 feet further south, right through the center of my bridge. A boundary line error, a tiny mistake, or maybe a convenient one. "You're using an invalid map," I said, firmly handing it back. "That land is mine, and the county confirmed it." He shrugged, stepping back. "Talk to the HOA, sir. We're just following orders." "Yeah," I muttered, "so were half the people in history who got sued for trespassing." That afternoon, I drove back to the county recorder's office with the bogus map in hand. The clerk, a young guy named Brian, looked it over, eyebrows raised. "Oh wow, this map's not even digital. That's an old developer draft. See here." He pointed to the corner of the document. "It says preliminary planning, not final. They can't use this for anything legal. Tell that to the woman across the creek," I said. "She thinks it's gospel." Brian printed me a certified boundary map with my name, parcel number, and GPS coordinates highlighted. "There," he said. "Black and white proof that your bridge sits entirely on private land. Keep this somewhere safe." "Oh, don't worry," I said, folding it carefully. "I'm thinking of framing it." For a while things went quiet. No more letters, no more paint. I almost thought they'd given up. Then came the drone. One afternoon, while I was sanding the railing on the bridge, I heard a faint buzzing overhead. I looked up. A small, black drone hovered above me, camera blinking red. It circled the bridge twice, then zipped toward the HOA side. I waved a wrench at it like some kind of angry scarecrow. "You're trespassing too, buddy." That night, the HOA website posted a new article titled "Unsafe Private Construction Threatens Community Creek Access." The thumbnail, a photo taken from the drone, my bridge, my house in the background, zoomed in just enough to make it look crooked. I couldn't believe it. They'd turned a hand-built memorial bridge into a public menace. A few neighbors from across the creek, good folks not part of the HOA board, called to apologize. "Thomas, we saw what they posted. We know you're not part of this mess." One of them, a retired teacher named Mark, even whispered, "Between you and me, half the community hates Linda. She's power-hungry. Always looking for someone to bully. Guess you're her next project." He wasn't wrong. 3 days later, I came home to find a bright yellow paper nailed to the wooden post at the end of my driveway. It read, "HOA Enforcement Notice. Immediate removal of non-compliant bridge required. Failure to comply may result in administrative penalties and forced removal." I stared at it, jaw clenched, hands shaking. The bridge stood quietly behind me, lit by the setting sun. Still beautiful, still strong, still mine. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat on the porch, listening to the creek, watching fireflies blink over the water. For the first time, anger began to outgrow patience. I wasn't just dealing with a mistake, this was harassment. They wanted control. They wanted obedience. I thought of Eleanor again. She'd always said that people who crave control usually fear chaos, and nothing scares them more than someone who can't be controlled. The next morning, I sent a formal cease and desist letter, certified mail, addressed directly to the HOA board. I included the county survey map, my title deed, and the environmental permit for the original bridge. I even highlighted the section stating property is privately owned and outside all municipal or HOA jurisdiction. I ended it with one line: "Any further attempt to trespass or alter my property will be treated as criminal destruction and reported to county authorities." 2 days later, I received an email from Linda herself. It began with fake politeness and ended with venom. "Mr. Harris, we appreciate your passion for your property. However, Creekside Meadows operates under the principle of community visual integrity. As your bridge directly affects neighborhood views, we reserve the right to intervene to preserve our shared environment. Kindly remove the structure by the end of the month to avoid escalation. Sincerely, Linda Parker, HOA President." I laughed out loud. Visual integrity, what kind of phrase was that? Still, something in her tone felt final. At that point, most people would have called a lawyer. I didn't, not yet. I wanted to see just how far they'd go. So I waited, documenting every interaction, keeping my camera pointed at the bridge day and night. 2 weeks passed. Nothing happened. The notices stopped. The drone vanished. Even Linda's smug car, that silver Lexus with HOA 1 on the plate, stopped showing up. Then one night I noticed something odd, a row of orange flags planted along the creek bank near the bridge. They hadn't been there the day before. At first I thought maybe the county was planning flood maintenance. But when I followed the line of flags, they led straight to the base of my bridge, and each was marked with initials: CPHOA, Creekside Property Homeowners Association. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. The next morning I called the county inspector's office. They confirmed they had issued no work permits for that area. No maintenance, no construction, no demolitions. Which meant whatever was coming next wasn't legal. I remember standing on the bridge that evening, staring at the stonework Eleanor and I had laid with our hands. I brushed my fingers across the cool surface, tracing the moss-covered cracks. The creek murmured softly, the sky bruised purple with twilight. "I'm not moving it," I whispered. "Not for her, not for anyone." The wind carried that vow across the water into the silence of the oncoming night. I didn't know it then, but that silence wouldn't last long. The next sound I heard from that creek would be engines. Diesel, metal, and by morning my bridge would be gone. It was just past midnight when the sound reached me, deep, mechanical, and wrong, a low rumble like thunder that had forgotten to fade. I sat upright in bed, heart hammering. The sound came again, clank, hiss, grind. Diesel engines. I threw on my jacket and stepped onto the porch. A faint orange glow flickered beyond the trees near the creek. For a second I thought maybe a neighbor had left a generator running. But then I heard voices shouting metallic clangs and the unmistakable crack of stone under pressure. I ran down the dirt path toward the sound, flashlight in hand. The night air smelled of oil and wet earth. As I broke through the tree line, my breath caught in my throat. There, under the floodlights, a yellow excavator was parked right at the edge of my bridge. Two men in reflective vests were standing beside it, one waving instructions, the other operating the machine. Each movement of that hydraulic arm sent a shiver through me. The excavator's claw came down hard crunch, and a chunk of the stone railing shattered, falling into the dark water below. "Stop!" I yelled, sprinting toward them. "What the hell are you doing?" The man on the ground turned, startled. "Sir, please stay back. We've got authorization to remove an unsafe structure." "Authorization from who?" He held up a clipboard, tapping a paper with a gloved finger. "Creekside Meadows, HOA. Work order #214. I snatched the document out of his hand. Even in the glare of their lights, I could tell it was a joke. An HOA letterhead, no county seal, no permit number, no inspector's signature. Just a cheap forgery printed on fancy paper. "This is illegal," I barked. "This is my bridge, my property. You're trespassing." The operator paused, but the man beside him shrugged. "We were told it's community land. You'll have to take it up with the HOA, sir." "Take it up with the HOA," I stepped closer, pointing at the bridge. "You're destroying 25 years of work right now." The excavator's arm swung again, breaking another stone section. Dust rose in the floodlights, swirling like smoke. The creek gurgled beneath, carrying away pieces of my life. Something inside me snapped. I pulled out my phone and started recording, shouting every detail for the camera. "This is Thomas Harris, property owner, recording an act of trespassing and destruction ordered by the Creekside Meadows HOA. These men are demolishing my private bridge without permit or authority." The operator shut off the engine, clearly nervous. "Look, sir, we're just following the order." "Then tell your boss to follow me to court," I snapped. That's when I saw her. Linda Parker stood on the far bank, wrapped in a beige trench coat, arms crossed, clipboard in hand, a smug half-smile cutting across her face. Her silver Lexus was parked just behind her headlights, aimed like spotlights across the water. "Evening, Mr. Harris," she called out. "I told you this structure was unsafe. The board voted for removal. You should thank us before someone got hurt." "Someone's about to get hurt," I growled, "and it won't be because of this bridge." She tilted her head, feigning pity. "You know you could have avoided all this by cooperating, but you just had to make it difficult." "Cooperating? I'm not even in your damn HOA. "Oh, technicalities," she said with a wave of her hand. "The creek connects us all. We're just ensuring the community's safety and consistency. Can't have a crumbling old bridge spoiling the view from our walking path." "Consistency," I laughed bitterly. "Lady, this bridge has stood through floods, storms, and time itself. The only thing crumbling here is your common sense." Linda smiled thinly. "That's quite the speech, Mr. Harris, but I'm afraid it's too late." She gestured with her hand, and the excavator's arm came down one last time. The arch gave way with a deep, echoing crack. A cascade of stone tumbled into the creek, splashing cold water high into the air. The noise drowned out everything for a moment, even my shouting, even Linda's smug silence. When it was over, only rubble remained. The bridge that Eleanor and I had built by hand, stone by stone, heart by heart, lay shattered in the black water below. I stood, frozen throat tight, unable to speak. Linda stepped closer to the creek bank, her voice calm, satisfied. "You can walk across like everyone else now. Consider it a lesson in humility." I met her gaze and said quietly, "You just declared war, Mrs. Parker, and I don't lose wars." She smirked. "We'll see." Then she turned and walked away, heels clicking against the concrete as the floodlights shut off one by one. By the time the sheriff arrived 30 minutes later, the work crew and machines were gone. All that remained were tire tracks in the mud and the mangled skeleton of what once was my bridge. The deputy, a young man who clearly wasn't used to dealing with HOA feuds, took my statement but looked uncertain. "Do you have proof it was them?" I pointed at the glowing video on my phone. "Every second of it." He nodded slowly. "Good. Keep that safe. I'll file the report, but you'll probably want to talk to the county inspector too." "I plan to," I said. That night I barely slept. I sat on the porch until dawn watching the mist rise from the creek. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Eleanor's face the way she used to brush dust from the stones while humming under her breath. She loved that bridge. It was our promise to each other that we could build something that lasted, and now it was gone. By sunrise, I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. I grabbed my old drafting board, rolled out a fresh sheet of paper, and began to draw. Years of engineering training returned like muscle memory. I sketched the shape of a new bridge, stronger, higher, unbreakable, every measurement precise, every line sharp. This wouldn't just be a rebuild, it would be a statement. While I worked, I called an old friend, Mark Jennings, a retired county civil inspector. "Mark, it's Thomas. I need an assessment report on a demolished private bridge, environmental impact, structural loss, the works." He sighed. "What happened this time, Thomas?" "The HOA happened," I said flatly. Mark whistled. "Oh boy. That woman again, yep. And this time she went too far." He promised to come by the next day. In the meantime, I contacted the county environmental agency. They confirmed that any demolition involving creek structures required a special environmental permit, which the HOA definitely didn't have. Even minor disturbance of a waterway could result in tens of thousands in fines. A small smile crept across my face. "Guess who just opened a new floodgate?" I muttered. Later that afternoon, as I walked down to the ruined bridge, I noticed something glittering among the stones. A metal tag, likely from the excavator. Stamped on it were the letters Parker Construction Group, Linda's last name. It hit me then she hadn't just ordered the demolition, she'd profited from it. Her brother, Richard Parker, owned the very company that did the job. HOA money, private benefit, illegal destruction. It was a perfect trifecta of corruption. That evening I stood where the bridge had been and recorded a new video. My voice was steady cold. "Linda Parker and the Creekside Meadows HOA have illegally destroyed my private property. They forged documents, trespassed, and damaged a protected creek. But here's the thing about bridges: when you tear one down, you can't control what flows through afterward. You started this. I'll finish it." I uploaded the video online. Within hours, it began to spread. Local news outlets picked it up. The headline read, "HOA destroys private stone bridge in community aesthetic dispute." By midnight, the story had thousands of comments. Some were furious, others amused, but nearly all agreed on one thing: the HOA had gone too far. For the first time in months, I slept. Not peacefully, but with purpose. Tomorrow, I'd start rebuilding. Not just the bridge, but my case. And when I was done, Linda Parker wouldn't just lose her title. She'd lose everything built on lies. By morning, the story had spread farther than I ever imagined. My inbox was flooded with messages, some from sympathetic neighbors, others from people across the country who had fought their own HOA nightmares. One headline on a local blog read, "HOA president orders demolition of man's private bridge, claims it was for aesthetic uniformity." For the first time, I felt a bit of wind at my back, but I knew sympathy wasn't enough. I didn't want pity, I wanted justice. Mark Jennings, my retired inspector friend, arrived just before noon. His pickup truck rumbled down the dirt road, toolbox rattling in the back. He stepped out, adjusted his cap, and whistled low when he saw the wreckage. "Good Lord, Thomas," he said, kicking at a pile of broken stone. "They really did a number on it." "Yeah," I muttered. "They call it community improvement." He crouched down, flashlight in hand, examining the debris like a detective at a crime scene. "You said they didn't have a permit, no county record, no environmental clearance, just a fake HOA work order." He shook his head. "Then they're in deep trouble. You can't so much as pull a weed near a waterway without 3 signatures and a permit number. Destroying a bridge, that's an environmental violation, plain and simple." I handed him the tag I'd found, Parker Construction Group. He turned it over, eyes narrowing. "Well, would you look at that? Conflict of interest written all over it." He stood and pulled out his camera, taking detailed shots of the collapsed structure. "You said you built this yourself, right, 25 years ago? Every stone by hand." "I have the original blueprints and county approval." He smiled grimly. "Then you've got them cornered. The only thing stronger than a bridge built by an engineer is an engineer with evidence." While he worked, I started making calls, first to the county zoning department, then to the Environmental Protection Office. Each one confirmed the same thing. There were no permits issued for demolition in my area, none. That meant Linda Parker and her HOA had just committed multiple violations, trespassing, destruction of private property, and illegal disturbance of a protected creek. I printed out every email and report. My kitchen table became a battlefield: blueprints, photographs, survey maps, and letters, all laid out like artillery. When I was done, I had a stack of proof so thick it could stop a bullet. That's when I decided to go for the kill. The next morning, I drove into town, straight to the County Office of Land Records. The clerk, Brian, the same kid who'd helped me before, blinked when he saw me carrying 2 giant binders. "Uh-oh," he said. "You're back." "Back with vengeance?" I said, dropping the binders on the counter with a thud. "I need certified copies of everything you've got on Parcel 214B, including the historic plat maps, waterway boundaries, and all revisions from 1990 onward." He whistled. "That's a lot of paperwork, Mr. Harris." "Good," I said. "Because this time I'm not just defending my bridge, I'm going after theirs." He printed everything. Dozens of pages later, I noticed something strange. On one of the earliest maps, the one the HOA had been using, there was a faint handwritten note at the bottom corner: boundary adjustment, pending county approval. But when I flipped to the following year's map, that adjustment was gone. Rejected. The creek boundary had officially been moved back north, confirming my property line beyond doubt. So why had the HOA acted like the old map was still valid? Then I saw the answer. The HOA's developer, Parker Development LLC. Linda's family again. They weren't just running the HOA, they built it. Her father had been the original developer. Her brother ran the construction firm. Her husband managed the landscaping contracts. It was one big, shiny, nepotistic empire dressed up as community service. And they'd used those old, outdated developer maps to justify stealing land for years. It was bigger than just my bridge. I realized with a cold chill my property wasn't the first they'd tried to claim. I called my neighbor Mark, the retired teacher. He picked up instantly. "Thomas, you won't believe this. I just got an HOA letter claiming part of my backyard encroaches on community space. They want me to move my fence." "Don't move a damn thing," I said. "They're running a scam." I explained what I'd found, and he whistled. "That's criminal. You gonna take it to court?" "Court? Oh, I'll take it further than that." That night, I started compiling a full report. I used every trick I'd learned in my career: clean formatting, chronological order, reference numbers. By dawn, I had a 47-page dossier titled "Unauthorized Demolition and Boundary Misrepresentation, Creekside Meadows HOA." It wasn't just evidence, it was an indictment. I sent digital copies to the county attorney's office, the local news station, and the state environmental agency. Then, just to twist the knife, I sent one to the HOA's official email with the subject line, "For your records," before the records become public. Within an hour, I got a reply, not from Linda, but from her lawyer, Mr. Harris. "The Creekside Meadows HOA strongly denies any wrongdoing. Any claims you make publicly will be considered defamation. We urge you to cease further contact." I laughed out loud. Defamation. You demolished a bridge on camera. Mark, the inspector, came by later that afternoon with his official report. "Here," he said, handing it to me. Filed and notarized. "Estimated damage $92,000, not including environmental restoration." "Beautiful," I said. "That'll do." He chuckled. "What's your next move, Patience?" I said. "Let them stew in it for a while." And stew they did. A few days later, I heard through the grapevine that the HOA board was in chaos. Several members were furious that Linda had authorized a demolition without a formal vote. Others were panicking because residents were starting to demand answers about missing funds. Apparently, the HOA's maintenance budget, the one that had paid for the excavator, came from resident dues, meaning every homeowner was now unknowingly part of an illegal act. The whispers grew louder. One evening, while I was cleaning debris near the creek, a woman approached from the other side, a homeowner from Creekside. Her name was Emily. "Mr. Harris," she said softly, "I'm sorry for what happened. We didn't know she ordered that. She told us it was county mandated." I nodded. "She lies easily, doesn't she?" "She does," Emily said. "She's been running this place like her personal kingdom. But after what she did to your bridge, people are talking. Some want her gone." "Then give them something to talk about," I said, handing her a printed copy of my report. "Page 12. Read it out loud at your next meeting." She took it carefully, like I'd just handed her a live grenade. By the end of that week, local reporters were camping outside the HOA's gates. Questions surround HOA's demolition of private structure, the news anchor said. President Linda Parker declines to comment. Declines to comment, those are the 4 words every guilty person hides behind. And still, I wasn't done. I decided to go one step further. I submitted a civil claim for damages citing illegal demolition, environmental contamination, and property trespass. The sheriff's report marks assessment, and every video I'd recorded became evidence. The county court accepted the case immediately. When the summons was served to the HOA office, Linda's empire began to crumble. Residents started showing up at her house demanding to see the books. Someone leaked financial statements online, revealing payments made from HOA funds directly to Parker Construction Group. Within days, the story had gone viral. HOA corruption, nepotism, destruction, and deceit, all tied neatly together with Linda's name on top. The woman who wanted to teach me a lesson was now the subject of a county investigation, a civil lawsuit, and a media firestorm. As I sat on the creek bank that evening, watching the water carry away the last bits of broken stone, I realized the tide had turned. For months, I had been the one defending my bridge. But now they were the ones trying to hold theirs together. And I wasn't done building yet. There's a certain satisfaction in building something the right way, stone by stone, inch by inch. It's slow, deliberate, and permanent. Revenge, as it turns out, works the same way. I'd spent a lifetime designing bridges, but this time I was designing justice. Every piece of evidence, every photograph, every signature was a foundation block. And when it was all in place, I'd build something that even Linda Parker couldn't tear down. But first I wanted to rebuild the bridge itself. The county had officially recognized my demolition claim. They even sent 2 environmental inspectors to verify the damage and the extent of debris left in the creek. Watching them wade through the shallow water with clipboards shaking their heads felt like therapy. Unauthorized heavy equipment access, one muttered. Disturbed sediment, the other added. I smiled to myself. Music to my ears. They took samples, snapped photos, and filed a full environmental impact report. A week later, the HOA received a notice of violation, a $40,000 fine for unpermitted demolition and creek disturbance. The letter didn't come from me this time. It came from the State Environmental Protection Agency. I framed a copy and hung it above my fireplace. Meanwhile, I was already deep into the reconstruction plans. This time, I wasn't rebuilding the same simple arch. I was creating something that would outlast me, a monument to every stubborn man who ever told an HOA to mind its own damn business. The new design was an arched stone bridge with reinforced granite columns, decorative iron railings, and engraved cornerstones reading "Private Property, Built to Last. No HOA access beyond this point." Every word carved in cold, permanent stone. When the construction trucks arrived, the sound of their engines drew half the neighborhood's attention. Some of the HOA residents stopped along the walking trail, whispering, taking photos. A few waved, cautiously supportive. Then around noon, Linda showed up. Her Lexus rolled up just as the crane was lowering the first massive granite slab into place. She stepped out, heels clicking, sunglasses gleaming. "Mr. Harris," she said in that sickly sweet tone she used for public charm. "What is this? You can't just rebuild whatever you like." "The county's still reviewing, already approved," I interrupted, handing her a folded permit, stamped with the county seal. Fully inspected, fully authorized, fully legal. Her eyes flicked over it, and for a moment her smile cracked. "You're mocking this community," she hissed. "No," I said evenly. "I'm reminding it where it ends." Behind her, one of the workers chuckled. Another whispered, "Guess he's showing her how to build it right this time." She spun around and stormed back to her car. The tires screeched as she left. I stood there in the dust and sun watching the new bridge rise. Every block that went up felt like reclaiming a piece of my peace. By the end of the week, the bridge stood finished, stronger, wider, more beautiful than before. The day we completed it, I held a small reopening. Just me, Mark, and a handful of neighbors who'd grown tired of HOA nonsense. We grilled burgers, drank lemonade, and laughed about how Linda must be fuming. As the sun dipped low, its golden light glinting off the iron railings, I felt something like closure. But deep down, I knew the story wasn't over. Not yet. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from the HOA attorney. "Mr. Harris, the Creekside Meadows, HOA, hereby demands removal of signage and alterations that disrupt community harmony. Additionally, continued online defamation will result in legal action." I nearly choked laughing. They had the nerve to call me disruptive. Instead of replying, I printed the letter, walked to the bridge, and nailed it to the stone railing under the sign "Private Property." It looked perfect there, fluttering in the wind, a trophy of their stupidity. That same afternoon, a county officer stopped by to take follow-up photos for the environmental case. Linda apparently had tried to dispute the fine, claiming her demolition had been sanctioned by safety regulations. The officer, a tall man with mirrored sunglasses, smirked. Her argument didn't last long once we pulled the permit logs. She's in deeper than she realizes. How deep, I asked. He pulled out a notepad. Conflict of interest, misuse of HOA funds, unlicensed demolition, environmental damage. That's not a lawsuit anymore, that's a potential criminal referral. I poured him a cup of coffee and said, "You'll have front row seats when it hits court." And court was exactly where we were headed. In the weeks leading up to the trial, the internet had turned Linda into a local celebrity for all the wrong reasons. People loved the story, a retired engineer whose memorial bridge was destroyed by a power-hungry HOA only for him to rebuild it stronger and sue them into oblivion. I even started getting letters from strangers. One from Arizona said, "I watched your story, and I'm building a no HOA sign on my fence tomorrow." Another from Texas read, "Sir, you're my hero. My HOA tried to fine me for my dog's fur color. Revenge wasn't supposed to feel like fame, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't make me grin." Meanwhile, the HOA board began to fracture. Linda's allies resigned quietly. Homeowners started demanding transparency, asking where their dues had gone. When someone leaked an internal ledger showing a $65,000 construction expense paid directly to Parker Construction Group, that was the final crack. The HOA's own members called for a vote of no confidence. I wasn't there when they voted, but Mark sent me a text that night. "She's out." They kicked her off the board. And guess who they want to testify in court? You. I stared at that message for a long time, then typed back one word: perfect. The following morning I walked down to my bridge, coffee in hand. The water flowed steady and clear beneath it. Sunlight sparkled off the stone, making it look almost alive. For the first time since the demolition, I felt at peace, but it was a quiet kind of peace, the kind that hides something sharper underneath. I placed a small brass plaque on the side of the bridge. It read, "Rebuilt by the one who refused to bow." That night, I uploaded a new video titled, "How I Rebuilt the Bridge, HOA Destroyed." I narrated calmly, showing the before and after footage, the court filings, the environmental fines. No shouting, no anger, just facts, justice, and a bit of irony. Within 48 hours, it had over 1 million views. The next morning, I woke to an email from a local journalist asking for an interview. "Your story," she said, "is the perfect metaphor for standing up to control." I agreed under one condition: they film it right here on the bridge. When the cameras rolled, I stood with my hands on the new stone railing and said, "This bridge connects my past and present. It's what my wife and I built with love." And someone thought they could destroy that with paper and power. But you can't bulldoze integrity. You can't legislate memory. The reporter asked, "What do you hope happens next?" I looked at the water, smiling faintly. "I hope people remember that some things aren't meant to be controlled. Not land, not legacy, not love." She nodded, and the cameras clicked. By sunset, the clip aired across every local channel. HOA members across the state were probably choking on their cocktails watching it. Linda, somewhere behind her lawyer, must have been seething. But I didn't care anymore. I wasn't building for her. I was building for everyone who ever lost something to arrogance. And the beauty of stone, it outlasts arrogance every single time. A week later, my lawyer called. "Thomas, you're going to like this. The county prosecutor just filed official charges. Fraud, misappropriation of funds, and falsifying documents." I set my coffee down and leaned back, the weight of months lifting off my chest. "Well," I said, "looks like the lesson finally hit home." He chuckled. "Seems so. They say revenge is best served cold." I smiled, glancing at the flowing creek beneath the bridge. "Maybe, but I prefer it carved in stone." The courthouse smelled like old wood and tension, that strange mixture of polished oak benches, stale air, and nervous ambition. It was the kind of place where everyone thought they were right until a judge reminded them they weren't. I'd been in courtrooms before decades ago as an expert witness for bridge engineering disputes, but this time I wasn't there as a consultant. I was the plaintiff. And the defendant, sitting 20 feet away, perfectly pressed in her pastel suit, was Linda Parker, former queen of the HOA kingdom, now stripped of her crown and drowning in legal paperwork. I could feel her eyes on me as I took my seat. I didn't look back. "Case number 24CV1875, the clerk announced. "Harris versus Creekside Meadows Homeowners Association." The judge entered, a tall man with sharp eyes and the calm of someone who'd seen everything from speeding tickets to family feuds that ruined generations. "Let's begin." My lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Rachel Nguyen, stood up first. She was younger than me, but she carried herself with the kind of quiet fire that made juries lean forward. "Your Honor," she began, "this is a case about abuse of power, trespassing, and the unlawful destruction of private property, a bridge that represented a man's family legacy. The defendants, the Creekside Meadows, HOA, and its former president, Mrs. Parker, took it upon themselves to destroy what was never theirs, using falsified documents, unlicensed contractors, and resident dues to fund it." Then she paused, sliding a photo onto the display monitor. It was the image of my bridge, the one I'd taken on that last day sunlight hitting the arch just before they tore it down. The courtroom went silent. Even the sound of the ceiling fan seemed to fade. Rachel turned toward the judge. "Mr. Harris built this bridge himself 25 years ago with county approval. He and his late wife designed it by hand. The defendants destroyed it without a single legal permit. They claimed it was unsafe, but the county found no record of any complaint, no engineering report, no inspection, nothing but arrogance." Linda's lawyer, a corporate type with a too-expensive watch, stood up. "Objection. Emotional appeal." "Overruled," the judge said quietly. "Continue, Miss Nguyen." She nodded. "The HOA's justification was based on an outdated developer map, one that's been invalid for decades. Even worse, the demolition was performed by Parker Construction Group, a company owned by Mrs. Parker's brother. That's not community service. That's corruption." The defense attorney stood. "Your Honor, if I may." "Sit down, Mr. Coleman," the judge interrupted. "You'll have your turn." Then came the evidence. Rachel called my friend Mark, the retired inspector, to the stand. He spoke with the calm authority of a man who'd spent his life enforcing rules fairly. "The demolition was unpermitted, unsafe, and illegal," he said, holding up his report. "No authorization from the county, no environmental clearance, no notice to the property owner." Coleman tried to twist his words. "Mr. Jennings, isn't it true that sometimes old bridges can pose risks to community safety?" Mark smirked. "Sure, but not this one. It was safer than half the roads your HOA pays to maintain. I inspected the remains myself, structurally sound before demolition." The gallery chuckled softly. The judge smiled behind his glasses. Next, Rachel played the video I'd recorded that night. The lights dimmed, and the sound of engines filled the room. There I was on screen shouting over the noise, "This is my property, you're trespassing." The excavator arm slammed down, shattering the stones. Then, clear as day, the camera caught Linda Parker standing on the far bank, clipboard in hand, watching the destruction. When the video ended, Rachel simply said, "Your Honor, this isn't speculation, it's evidence." Linda's lawyer jumped up. "That footage was obtained under emotional duress." My client, the judge, raised a hand. "Mr. Coleman, please stop before you embarrass yourself further." The court recognizes the authenticity of the video. I couldn't help but smile. When Linda finally took the stand, the air in the room changed. She walked slowly, shoulders, stiff face painted with the kind of self-righteous composure that only the guilty seem to master. Rachel wasted no time. "Mrs. Parker, can you explain why Parker Construction Group, your brother's company, was paid over $65,000 from HOA funds for this demolition?" Linda cleared her throat. "The board authorized it." "Do you have meeting minutes showing that authorization?" We didn't take minutes that day. So no record of approval." Silence. Rachel smiled. "One more question. Did you ever obtain a county demolition permit?" Linda hesitated. "We believe the HOA's internal authorization was sufficient." The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Parker, HOA authorization does not override county law." "Surely as president you knew that." Linda's lips twitched. "I was acting in the community's best interest." Rachel stepped closer. "Whose community, Mrs. Parker? Because the land you destroyed didn't belong to you. It belonged to me." She pointed to me sitting at the plaintiff's table. The moment hung heavy in the air. The judge turned to Linda. "Answer the question directly." Linda's voice trembled. "I may have misunderstood the boundaries." Rachel handed her the certified survey map, the same one I'd used months earlier. "You misunderstood a 30-year-old map because it suited your goals." "That's not confusion. That's convenience." When the testimonies ended, the courtroom felt electric. Even the spectators, reporters, residents, and a few curious HOA members leaned forward waiting for the verdict. The judge adjusted his glasses, flipping through his notes. "I've heard enough." He began slowly, voice calm but deliberate. "The evidence shows beyond a doubt that the Creekside Meadows, HOA, and Mrs. Parker acted outside their jurisdiction, misused funds, and caused unlawful destruction of private property. The court finds in favor of Mr. Harris. A collective gasp swept through the room. The judge continued. The defendants are hereby ordered to compensate Mr. Harris for the full value of the demolished structure, $92,000, plus triple damages for willful misconduct and emotional distress totaling $276,000. Additionally, the HOA will be responsible for all environmental fines imposed by the state. He paused, then added with a faint smile, and, Mrs. Parker, you are personally barred from serving on any homeowners association board in this county again. Ever. Linda's mouth fell open. The sound of camera shutters filled the silence. Reporters scribbled notes like it was Christmas morning. For the first time since this nightmare began, I exhaled. Rachel patted my shoulder. Congratulations, Thomas. That's one hell of a bridge you built in court and out, I chuckled. Couldn't have done it without you. Outside the courthouse, the sunlight felt different, warmer, cleaner, like the air after a storm. A crowd had gathered, neighbors, reporters, even a few ex-HOA members who'd voted Linda out. Someone clapped. Then another. Before long, the whole group was cheering. A reporter thrust a microphone at me. Mr. Harris, what do you have to say to the people watching this story? I smiled, looking straight into the camera. You can tear down stone, but you can't tear down truth. That bridge was built on solid ground, and so was this case. Applause broke out again. I turned and walked toward my truck, the courthouse fading behind me. As I drove home, the radio played a news segment about the case. Words like landmark victory and HOA accountability floated through the speakers. I couldn't help but grin. When I reached the creek, the late afternoon light danced across the new bridge. I parked, got out, and just stood there for a while, hands in my pockets, wind in my hair, the steady sound of water rushing beneath. Across the water, the once busy HOA trail was quiet. The signs they'd installed, community viewing area, shared creek access, had all been taken down. I walked to the center of my bridge, the spot where Eleanor used to sit and sketch. The sunlight caught the engraving on the side, private property, built to last. I ran my fingers over the letters and whispered, "We did it, Ellie." Somewhere between the sound of the water and the whisper of the trees, I could almost hear her laugh again. 2 days later, a county truck arrived to remove the last of the debris from the creek part of the court's order. The officer in charge saluted me before leaving. "Good to see justice built strong, sir," I smiled. "That's the only kind that lasts." That night I uploaded one final video, a slow montage of the trial footage, the rebuilt bridge, and the sunset over the creek. The caption read, "They destroyed my bridge to teach me a lesson." Now, the world knows who really failed the test. By morning, it had 1 million more views. And for the first time in a long time, I slept soundly, not because the fight was over, but because my bridge finally stood where it belonged. On solid ground. They say time heals everything, but I don't think that's true. Time doesn't heal. It just gives you enough distance to see what was worth hurting for. 3 months after the verdict, the creek looked alive again. The county had cleared the debris, regraded the banks, and replanted willows where the old soil had been torn apart. The new bridge, my bridge, stood firm and unshakable, its granite surface gleaming in the afternoon light. Every time I crossed it, I felt the same quiet satisfaction I used to feel walking with Eleanor hand in hand, the stones humming softly under our feet. But this time it meant something different. It wasn't just a passage over water anymore, it was proof. Proof that truth, patience, and a bit of stubbornness can outlast even the loudest bullies with clipboards. The county sent me a final update. The HOA had paid every cent of the damages. The fine for environmental violations had nearly bankrupted them. Residents voted to dissolve the old board entirely and start fresh under a new charter. Linda Parker, meanwhile, had vanished. Rumor had it she moved to Florida, where, according to one particularly gleeful local reporter, she tried joining another HOA and was promptly rejected once her name popped up in the news archives. Justice has a sense of humor. One quiet morning, as I was sipping coffee on the porch, I heard a car pull up by the fence. It was Emily, the HOA resident who'd helped leak the truth. She stepped out carrying a box of homemade muffins and a small envelope. "Morning, Mr. Harris," she said. "Or should I say our local legend?" I chuckled. "Don't start that. I'm just a stubborn old man who likes his rocks where he left them." She smiled, handing me the envelope. The new board wanted me to deliver this personally. Inside was a letter signed by all the current HOA members. "Dear Mr. Harris, we, the residents of Creekside Meadows, wish to formally apologize for the events that led to the destruction of your bridge. Many of us were unaware of what truly happened until your courage made it clear. You reminded us that leadership without accountability isn't leadership at all. You have our respect and our gratitude. At the bottom, someone had added in pen, if you ever need help maintaining that beautiful bridge, you have neighbors now, not enemies. I folded the letter carefully and set it on the porch railing. For the first time, I actually believed them. A week later, a small crew of volunteers showed up at my gate with shovels and tools. They'd come to clean up the last remnants of rubble that had washed downstream. Most of them were from the same community that had once cheered for Linda's beautification plans. Funny how quickly people change when they learn who the real villain is. One of the men, a quiet guy named Doug, looked around awkwardly. "Mr. Harris, I owe you an apology. I was one of the people who voted to support her demolition plan. She told us it was county approved." I nodded slowly. "And now you know it wasn't." He nodded, kicking at the dirt. "Yeah. My wife said we should have listened to the guy with actual engineering experience." I smiled faintly. Women tend to be right about that sort of thing. We worked together in silence for a while, clearing old debris. By sunset, the creek looked almost pristine again. The reflection of the bridge shimmered on the water like a quiet reminder. Nothing man-made ever truly lasts forever, but some things last long enough to matter. Before leaving, Emily turned to me. "You know, this bridge brought the whole neighborhood together in the end." I looked out over the water. "That's the funny thing about bridges," I said. "They connect people, even the ones who try to tear them down." As weeks passed, life settled into a calm rhythm again. The HOA drama faded from the headlines, replaced by newer scandals, some city council fiasco, a dog park dispute, the usual circus. My story still circulated online, though, retold in short clips and reaction videos titled things like "HOA destroys, wrong man's property," or "Retired engineer schools, HOA president in court." It was surreal. Teenagers on TikTok quoting my line, "You can tear down stone but not truth." I never set out to become a symbol of rebellion against petty bureaucracy, but apparently that's what I'd become. Mark called one evening, laughing. "Thomas, you're a meme now," I sighed. "At least it's better than being an obituary." He chuckled. "You know what's funny? Half the county inspectors I talk to bring up your case in meetings. You've basically become required reading." "Well," I said, smiling, "then maybe something good came out of all that dust and diesel." Sometimes I'd catch myself walking the bridge at twilight, the same time of day Eleanor used to sit there sketching. The water beneath glowed with the colors of sunset gold fading into pink, melting into deep indigo. The soft murmur of the creek mixed with the evening breeze through the sycamores. I liked to imagine she was still there, somehow sitting just beyond sight, smiling at what we'd rebuilt. One evening I brought out one of her old sketchbooks, now weathered with age. Inside were faint pencil drawings, the bridge from every angle, the creek winding beneath it, her notes about light and shadow. On the final page she'd written, "Beauty doesn't last, but love leaves shape." I closed the book and rested it on the stone railing. She was right, of course. Love leaves shape, sometimes in stone, sometimes in scars. Later that month, the local newspaper published a final feature on the case, titled "The Bridge That Wouldn't Fall." The journalist visited the site, interviewed neighbors, even took aerial photos of the newly restored creek. At the end of the article she wrote, "In an age where homeowners associations wield absurd power, one man's quiet defiance reminded us that integrity still builds stronger foundations than authority ever will." I cut that line out and taped it inside Eleanor's sketchbook. Not long after, the county invited me to speak at a community event about property rights and environmental stewardship. At first I almost said no, I'm not one for podiums and microphones. But then I thought about all the people who'd been bullied by HOAs, who'd paid unfair fines, or lost parts of their homes to red tape. Maybe they needed to hear it. When I took the stage, I kept it simple. "I'm no hero," I began. "I'm just a man who built something with love and refused to let arrogance destroy it. You don't need power to stand your ground. You just need patience, proof, and a little bit of humor. Because if you can laugh while fighting back, they've already lost half their control." The crowd laughed softly, but their applause felt warm, real. Before I left, someone asked what lesson I'd learned through it all. I thought for a moment and said, "Don't build bridges for people who can't respect the other side." That night I walked home under a quiet sky. The stars shimmered like dust scattered across dark velvet. The new bridge glowed softly under the porch-lighted stones, catching the moon's reflection. I stopped in the middle, listening to the water flow beneath. It was peaceful, the kind of peace that comes after a storm you've survived, not one that passed you by. And for a brief, beautiful second, I felt that same sense of calm I'd felt all those years ago when Eleanor and I laid the final stone together. She'd smiled and said, "It'll stand long after we're gone." Now I knew she was right. Because some bridges aren't built just to cross water, they're built to remind people what stands when everything else falls. Sometimes standing your ground doesn't mean shouting the loudest, it means knowing when to let truth do the talking. People like Linda Parker will always exist, small minds with big clipboards. But no matter how much noise they make, they can't change what's solid. Whether it's stone evidence or integrity, if it's built right, it lasts. So the next time someone tells you to tear down what you built, remember this story. Hold your ground. Protect what's yours. Because in the end, justice isn't handed to you, you build it one stone at a time. Now it's your turn. Tell me in the comments, have you ever stood up to an HOA, a boss, or anyone who thought they could control you? Where are you watching from tonight? Let's keep this bridge of stories alive. And if you enjoyed this one, don't forget to subscribe. More real justice, more crazy HOA stories, and more bridges that refuse to fall are coming your way.